Ella Lawton, you are a dreamer, a tree hugger, idealistic, naive, too young, an academic, a greenie. I've been called a lot of names. In fact, just last week I received an email where I had a few more names added. Most of them I can't share with you here. The email was about a story that had been published in a New Zealand newspaper. It wasn't very well written, but it was explaining some of my research. It explained that the amount of resources and waste that some Kiwi lifestyles consume is as much as 7 times more than other lifestyles in New Zealand. Now, the reason I received the email is the person was very angry. He was angry because he thought that I was giving the average hard-working Kiwi a hard time. He said, my life is the result of the system I live in, and that system is governed by corporates and business and government, and I don't have that control. So I replied and I thanked him and said, please continue to have these conversations, they're really important. But I challenge you. How you spend your time and money is a direct reflection on the type of future that you want to live in. And I'll come back to that later. So when I graduated from university the first time, my mum got me a personalised number plate. Thanks, Mum. It said, I Lorax. Save the trees, save the world. My favourite Lorax quote. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. What I do is work with people and ideas to bring them together in order to bring about healthier and happier communities. Who I am is someone who cares a whole awful lot. The blue marble, planet Earth, has a finite amount of land and productive sea in which to provide us with all the goods and services we consume and all the waste that we create. It's about 11.9 billion hectares. I do what I do because I know that within my lifetime, the amount of land per person and the ability for that land to supply us with our goods and services is going to continue to decrease. The ability for people to access land in order to fulfill their fundamental needs is going to continue to be constrained. And business and government know this, and some of them have been buying up land across the planet for some time. I'm terrified for my future and for the future of my family as a sister and a daughter, hopefully one day as a mother. I'm scared for my fellow Kiwis, the rest of mankind, and all those other incredible species that we share this planet with. A little sad, but I'm not apologising. I will, however, provide you with an alternative vision, a different idea, one that we all need to play a part in. So let's just take a moment. What does it look like for you to live in a healthier and happier community? For you and your family? Would you have more time? Would you have more meaningful relationships? I'll share with you my vision. In my ideal future, my community celebrates diversity and imbues connectivity. While I remain connected to the outside world through technology, my fundamental needs are first and foremost created by my community. I have time to slow down. I relish every moment. I have time to talk to the people who make my clothes, grow my food, generate my electricity. I've been reconnected with the land and my place in it. Well-being is measured by the number of meaningful relationships, and we are having much more fun looking after people and the planet than we ever had destroying it. But this vision is quite different to what we are sold by marketing and maybe even governments. Why is that? What is it that they are winning, and what are the opportunities that we're missing out on? So for the last few years, I've been working on the New Zealand Footprint Project. The question for the project was, what are the natural limits to well-being? And what are those major things that we can do as New Zealanders that can help to reduce our reliance on resources whilst continuing to increase well-being? And as we looked around the world for other projects that had asked similar questions, we found that they were happening everywhere. My vision was happening in small pockets all over the place. And that common theme, the common idea, was localisation. And as Helena Norberg-Hodge says, localisation is a multiplier. So not only were these projects helping to reduce people's needs for resources, but they were increasing their social and economic well-being at the same time. But because I'm an academic hippie, I wanted to know how much better localisation was. So I brought together a whole lot of data and filled up lots of Excel sheets and went about piecing together the biggest puzzle I've ever incurred: the New Zealand ecological footprint. The footprint measures the amount of land required to provide us with the goods and services we consume and to sequester the waste that we create. It assumes that everything that we consume and the waste that we create can be brought back to a common denominator, land, and that land is measured in hectares. 1 hectare is equivalent to 1 international rugby field, or about 70 of the auditoriums that you're sitting in. It looks at demand and supply. Supply, as I mentioned before, is 11.9 billion hectares of land that we have available on the planet. Now, per person, that comes down to 1.25 hectares. Demand, as we found out through the project, for an average New Zealander is about 2.5 rugby fields. So if everyone on the planet lived like the average Kiwi, we would require 2.1 planets to provide us with all our goods and services. There's a problem here. And this is how it breaks down. So of the 2.1 planets that we require, more than one of those is just for food and beverage. That's all our meat and fish, their transport, their growing, fertilisers, processing, packaging, their buildings to house it all in, and then of course all the waste that we create at the other end. So this information's really exciting because what it allows us to do is see that there are opportunities for how we might reduce our footprint. And I'll give you an example, 2 scenarios. The first one, if we remove all of the meat and fish from a average Kiwi diet, then we can reduce our total ecological footprint by 25%, a quarter. But I'll give you an alternative. If we grow half of all of our food in our own backyards or on community land, we can reduce our footprint by 28%, more than 3% more. What this information's telling me is that it's not about stopping everything that we're consuming. It's about reprioritising and localising. So far I've talked a lot about food because it's easy, right? We can see that it grows on land. But I also wanted to bring in consumer goods, 23%. And I wanted to use a local example. So I decided to use the iconic Kiwi Jandal. I've told everyone how much I love these Jandals, how happy they make me, and they provide some really good examples about the social and economic benefits of why we reduce our footprint. I'll come back to these in a minute. Kapiti Coast in the southern part of the North Island used community rivalry to bring about an opportunity for reducing their footprint. So over the course of 1 year, they challenged each other to see how much they could reduce, and they found, because localisation is a multiplier, that they also had a whole lot of social and economic benefits that came along with it. One street saved $13,000 over the course of 11 months when they carpooled. That's 100 barrels of oil, or about 178 of these auditoriums worth of energy land. Another community built a community garden and then consumed the food when they were holding multiple street parties. They were lowering their food bill, lowering their footprint, and increasing the social fabric on which more magic could happen. And there's a close correlation between income, footprint, and time. The more time we spend working to earn money to buy those things that marketers tell us to buy, the less time we have to slow down. Slow food, slow travel. These things that reduce our total footprint. And if you don't have time, and you do have money, then use that money to provide someone with an income to buy locally. Because where we spend our money is really important. If we spend money with a local organisation, social enterprise, 80% of that money that we spend will stay in our local community and within the local economy. At an internationally owned business, only 20%. So if we take this 80% that we spend with a local cobbler, and then they spend it with the local baker and the local candlestick maker, then that money has gone round and round in the economy and it has multiplied. And over the course of 2 years, $10,000 spent at a local enterprise will turn into $23,616 in the local economy. So back to the Jandal. I love this Jandal. It's so good. And best of all, this guy made it for me. Greg Paul. He's a cobbler, just like his father, and just like his father before that. Greg handed me a family portrait and told me how much his father had appreciated being able to pass on his skills to his son. And when I asked Greg, "Hey Greg, what are the Jandals made out of?" he said, "Well, Ella, it all starts with grass, and cows eat grass, and leather comes from cows." And at that moment, I knew I had to include these Jandals in this talk. So these Jandals have built-in obsolescence. That is, much like many of the other things we buy, they break very soon after we buy them. And they do that when the little bit between our big toe and our middle toe falls out and is almost impossible to replace. Sound familiar? So Kiwis buy millions of Jandals each year, and they're often made from plastic, right? Oil is used to make plastic. Plastic's moulded into Jandals, and then they ultimately end up in the waste when the bit between our big toe and our little toe falls out and can't be repaired. Incredibly frustrating. We have to go out and buy yet another crappy pair of Jandals. But not these ones. Not the ones Greg Paul made. Because I can take these Jandals back into him and he can fix them for me. And when I calculate the ecological footprint of these Jandals versus the Jandals that could be imported made of plastic, the ecological footprint is half that for the New Zealand-made leather Jandals. My spending $80 with Greg means that he can go next door, spend it with his buddies and his buddies next to that, and within 2 years, my $80 can multiply out to $1,100. And how happy am I when I don't have to go and buy another crappy pair of Jandals? So, would localisation help to fulfil your vision? It's worth a go. Because as we move towards a more resource-constrained future, the current systems are not going to cope. It's like sitting in a car, travelling 100 kilometres along a motorway, straight towards a brick wall, and we're fighting about who's going to sit in the back seat. It's insanity. We need to redesign the systems so that they respect the natural limits to well-being. And we can have more fun looking after people and the planet than we ever had destroying it. Why can't we measure well-being based on the number of meaningful relationships? So if you're doing everything that you can to localise, then thank you. If you're not, remember that how you spend your time and money reflects the type of future that you want to live in. So just take one thing. Maybe you're bringing home the kiwi jandal or your fruit and veg that you previously bought from elsewhere, and then find a quality local who can make that for you instead. And know that every time you do, you are helping to make healthier and happier communities. Thank you.